Welcome, students. And as we wrap up week 7, we wrap up the first part of our theater unit. And so theater, like prose and poetry, opens us up to experiences that we would never have otherwise experienced. Theater, as you can see here, takes us out of our shells, and takes us out of our comfort zones and allows us to experience drama and conflict that we would normally not experience in our own lives, allowing us to learn about perspectives from other people's point of view or from other cultures. And so for me, I love going to the theater because it's the live interaction between the actors, the actresses, and the audience. And that constant interplay is what makes a theater like a live organism and such fun. Other aspects of theater include opera, going to a concert. All of it is there's a stage and then you have the audience. And so when you are at the theater, it really is the relationship between the actors, actresses, and the audience. And it's that interplay and that chemistry that makes theater so special. It also is what makes theater so classic, since way before Shakespeare time, going all the way back to the Greeks. And so I'm not going to mention the history of theater because I know I mentioned that in my week 7 lecture. So the purpose of this lecture is simply to wrap up our week 7 experience into theater when we study Trifles by Susan Glaspell. So let me give you a few of my notes. Theater, like prose and poetry, opens us up to experience other perspectives. I just said that. Theater's way of examining dialogue, monologue, and character allows us to flex our empathy muscles. And so one of the major aspects of theater is the use of dialogue. For the only way to move, that's what distinguishes theater from prose and from poetry and even from movies, is that the only way to move the story forward is through dialogue. In the setting, in the theater, has to be all what you can fit on stage. And so that's why it's the dialogue and the conflict and the drama and the story elements between the actors and actresses, between the characters, and between how the actor and actresses interpret the character, as well as the relationship between the audience and the actors and actresses. And that's what propels a story. That's what propels a theater, and that's what makes theater such a special experience. And so when we experience what others experience, we flex our empathy muscles. The social interaction and risk-taking in drama helps us develop trust in self and others in the process. And so it also interjects. Theater is also a great way to relax. For theater, interjects humor, and it interjects a little lively banter into our lives. And so when I go to the theater, that's what I like is that I love the live interaction. And and also theater, just like with poetry and prose, theater can also be used as an instrument to promote social change and to make people aware of social injustices of the past. So this brings us to Trifles. So when we study Trifles, we are able to see how women were treated in the early 18th and 19th century. And so when we study history, and when we look at history in literature, that's known as historical literary criticism. And I know I said this before in my lectures and in the forums and all that kind of stuff. And when we look at the role of women in literature, then we are engaging in feminist literary criticism. So as you can see, the different literary criticisms carry across all the different kinds of literature. So you can use feminist literary criticism when you study prose. You can use feminist literary criticism when you study poetry, such as what happened to the Duchess in the poem The Last Duchess. or in the story, The Yellow Wallpaper. And now, trifles. So I did mention in the past that we were going to study trifles in week 7, and then week 7 came and went, and it was so fast. And so week 7 and 8, I mean. And so in trifles, what happens, as you know, is the theatrical question of who did it, who committed the murder. Was it some stranger from the outside, or was it the suffering wife, Minnie Wright? And so for your essay, I think one of your assignments, you had to do a character analysis of the different female characters in trifles. Mrs. Hale, Mrs. Peters, and Mrs. Wright. And so was it right for the women, Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Peters, to defend Mrs. Wright from the men? Was it right for them to do that? And why did they do that? Why did the women instinctively feel that they had to side with Minnie Wright? So, as I said, looking at history, you see how much progress has been made in women's rights in the United States, although in other countries, women's rights still has a ways to go. And you also see in trifles what lengths Minnie Wright went to get rid of her husband so that she could experience freedom. Unlike the Mrs. Mallard in The Story of an Hour, in which the only way she could experience freedom from her husband is through dying of a heart attack. So, getting back to theater. And also another thing about theater is theater reflects what's trending in society. And so if you watch, and I highly recommend you watch Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde's plays are so funny because he makes fun of the hypocrisy and the lies of English society. And so it's really, if you're going to watch any theater at all, go watch Oscar Wilde. So all you have to do is put in the name Oscar Wilde, and then on YouTube, and there will be a play that shows up. I can't remember. The Importance of Being Earnest is one of them that comes off the top of my head. It is really funny to this day. And that's why, unlike trifles, Oscar Wilde's plays are very, very funny. It's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of a joke. Okay, and so, so theater reflects what's trending in society. So obviously Oscar Wilde's plays represent what was trending in society, in English society during his time period. Shakespeare, you have to see a Shakespeare play. For all of Shakespeare's screenplays was written to be performed. So when I teach Shakespeare to teenagers, I always emphasize, do you want to read a play that has violence and sex and both? Can you imagine plays have that? And then of course the teenagers become fascinated, and then I get them hooked to watching Shakespeare. If you're afraid that you won't understand the Shakespearean language, you can always watch the play or read the play in modern English. Shakespeare Without Fear has a website in which you can read all of Shakespeare's plays in modern English. And so then after you read it in modern English and you know the storyline, then you can go to YouTube and you can watch the actual Shakespeare play in Shakespearean English, and that will help you appreciate what's going on. And Shakespeare's plays run the gamut of love, violence, betrayal, murder, all of it. You know, all that was trending in English society still trends in everyone else's society as well, which shows you how universal drama is in all cultures. And then if you watch my week 7 lecture, I also give a short lecture about how I used to watch my aunts and uncles do Asian theater. And then you can listen to the Beijing theater. It sounds so different than Western theater. So that's also a fun thing, is to, if you have time, go to a theater performance from another country, such as an Asian theater performance, from some other, and then compare it to Western, what you see in the West. And it's fascinating how different and yet how much the same we all are. And so this is pretty much I think that's all I wanted to say about theater. Theater reflects what's trending in society. I covered that. Oh, and so as you go over trifles, I know I'm going a little off topic. Think about why, I want you to continue to think about the difference between the written version of trifles written as a play and performed as a play, and then trifles in the movie version. Because for your week 8 explication essay, it's going to be the last paper of this class. You are going to compare the movie adaptation of trifles to the play adaptation of trifles. And I put both of them up in the week 8 forum, and you need to watch the entire movie version and the entire play version. And then compare and contrast, because you're writing a comparison contrast explication essay about the difference in plot, setting, character, and tone of the movie version versus the stage version. And so in my next wrap-up, I will talk about the difference between theater and movies, and I'll see you in the movies. And so this wraps up my week 7 lecture on why I love theater and why I love the live interaction of the audience in a theater. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me.